Harborview was a city that never fully exhaled. It existed under a permanent shroud of coastal fog, the air tasting of salt, diesel, and rust. On the East Coast, it was the artery, not the heart. Giant container ships, mountains of oxidized steel, groaned at the docks day and night. When darkness fell, the only light came from aging neon signs, bleeding reds and blues onto the rain-slicked streets, turning oil slicks into fractured, chemical rainbows. This was a city of cold cargo and colder transactions. Calder Vascari owned the cargo. At 38, he was the public face of Vascari Holdings, a logistics and real estate empire that seemed to own the very coastline. His name was carved onto skyscrapers that pierced the fog, but the whispers in the dockyards, in the back rooms of smoky bars, and in the halls of city government spoke of another name, the Vascari Syndicate. They called him the Don, a title he never acknowledged and never had to. He moved through the city like the fog itself, silent, encompassing, and chilling. Mara Delaney lived in the city Calder owned, but in a world he never saw. She was 33, a single mother whose life was measured in the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor and the warm scent of rising yeast. By night, she wore the dark blue uniform of a 911 emergency medical technician, her hands steady under the frantic pulse of the city's dying. By day, she tied a flour-dusted apron at the Fox and Flower, a small bakery wedged between a pawnshop and a laundromat. Her world was small, finite, and anchored completely by her son. The call came at 2:17 in the morning, a multi-vehicle collision on the South Pier Bridge. Mara's unit, Ambulance 64, was closest. As they raced over the suspended roadway, the dispatch crackled with urgent, fragmented updates. Reports of shots fired, possible hostile situation, proceed with extreme caution. The sirens overlapped, echoing off the high steel arches, creating a disorienting symphony of chaos. Mara pulled her gloves tighter, her knuckles brushing the worn plastic of the jump bag. The scene was worse than the radio suggested. A black sedan, looking more like a fortress than a car, was accordioned against a concrete support pylon. It had been the center of a 3-car convoy, now shattered and smoking. Mara grabbed the heavy trauma bag and kicked open the ambulance door. The air smelled of gunpowder and burnt rubber. She moved toward the primary vehicle, pushing past the periphery of flashing red and blue lights. She reached the driver's side. The man inside was already gone, his gaze fixed on the broken windshield. She moved to the passenger side. She pulled the warped door, the metal groaning in protest. He was leaning against the deployed airbag, perfectly still. He looked up. Their eyes met through the fractured spiderweb of the side window, steel gray. That was her first thought. Not pained, not scared, just steel. Calder Vascari. She recognized him from the business journals. There was no blood on his face, but it seeped from his cuff, a dark, arterial stain on a crisp white shirt, dripping slowly from his wrist onto the expensive leather interior. "Sir, I'm Mara. I'm an EMT. Can you tell me your name?" Calder Vascari just watched her. He did not speak. "Okay," she said, her voice dropping into the low, warm blanket of sound she used for frightened children and hysterical spouses. "I see the bleeding. I need to apply pressure." She reached inside, her gloved hands efficient and sure. He did not flinch as she pressed the gauze hard against the laceration on his forearm. He wasn't looking at the wound. He was looking at her. His gaze was unnerving, analytical and intense. It was not the look of a victim. It was the look of a predator, assessing a new, unexpected element in its territory. He was, she realized with a cold jolt, investigating her. A sharp crack, distinct from the popping of the engine fire. "Sniper, get down," a voice roared from the car behind them. Mara looked up instinctively. On the high iron archway of the bridge, a shadow moved against the fog, a silhouette against the lesser dark. A large man in a dark suit who had appeared from the second car slammed his own body against Calder's open door, using his bulk to shield the opening. Eli Mercer, Mara registered vaguely, Vascari's head of security. Another shot pinged off the ambulance chassis, inches from her head. Mara's training took over. She didn't think, she reacted. She turned, dropping low, and used her own body to cover the second victim, a security driver half-sprawled on the pavement near the rear wheel, groaning. She shielded his head with her own back as concrete chips sprayed the air around them. The chaos intensified. The thwack, thwack, thwack of news helicopters drowned the sirens. They descended like vultures, their spotlights cutting white holes in the darkness, pinning the wreckage. And then the others arrived, dark SUVs, unmarked, cutting through the police blockade with an authority the police did not challenge. Men in tactical vests stamped with 3 bold letters, AIC, the Atlantic Integrity Commission. A man in a trench coat, his face sharp and ferret-like, ignored the police chief and strode directly toward the wreckage, toward Calder. "Vescari, what happened here?" he barked, his questions aggressive, accusatory. Was this the Albright syndicate? Was this a territorial dispute? Calder ignored the man, his eyes still on Mara as she rose from the other victim, checking her bag for a pressure bandage. Eli Mercer, pressing a radio to his ear, spoke low and urgent into his microphone. "Secure the asset. Authorize Ravenlight. I repeat, Ravenlight is a go." Mara heard it. The word Ravenlight cut through the noise, sharp and strange. It meant nothing to her. Just another piece of radio static and a night full of it. She dismissed it, turning back to the wounded driver, checking his pulse. But Calder Vescari heard it, and he saw that she had heard it. He did not forget. The morning light did little to sanitize Harborview. It only revealed the grime. The front page of the Harborview Herald was dominated by a grainy, long-lens photo of the carnage on the South Pier. The headline was "Stark Bloodshed on the Bridge." The article underneath, however, was pure speculation. It used words like syndicate, territorial, and mafia. One tabloid, the Harborview Post, was already screaming Port Purge in bold 3-inch letters. By 9 in the morning, the chaos had triggered an avalanche. The Tri-State Fiscal Crimes Authority, the TFCA, a federal bulldog of an agency that had been trying to get its teeth into Vescari Holdings for years, publicly announced a sweeping investigation, citing clear indicators of organized crime and financial irregularities that the previous night's violence suggested. Calder Vescari was, officially, under siege. Mara Delaney, smelling of antiseptic and adrenaline, was dusting flour off her hands. She had finished her shift at dawn, showered, and driven straight to the Fox and Flower for her day shift, running on 3 hours of fragmented sleep. The bakery was her sanctuary, a small pocket of warmth and yeast that held the city at bay. Her son, Finn, sat in his usual booth, sketching furiously on a stack of napkins. He was 8 years old, a quiet, brilliant boy who processed the world through gears and circuits. He was obsessed with robotics. "Mom," he said, not looking up from his drawing, "did you see the man in black last night?" Mara froze, her hand hovering over a tray of croissants. The news was on a small television mounted in the corner, the volume low, but the images of the bridge were unavoidable. "What man, sweetie?" "On the news. The big one. By the broken car." Finn held up his napkin. He had drawn a tall, block-shouldered figure. He looked like a bodyguard robot, the T-800 series. Maybe. Eli Mercer? The image of the man using his own body as a shield flashed in her mind. She forced a smile, her stomach tightening. Just a man in a suit, Finnbug, he was helping. "Cool," Finn murmured, returning to his drawing. The morning rush was a blur of coffee orders and bagel baskets. It was just after 11 when Mara went to take the recycling out the back door. A plain white envelope was wedged in the rusted metal door frame. No stamp, no address, hand-delivered. Her fingers felt cold as she picked it up. Inside, there was no letter, just a photograph. It was her. A grainy telephoto shot, clearly taken last night. She was at the edge of the police lights, her face turned up, her gaze aimed directly at the dark archway of the bridge at the exact spot where the sniper had been. She flipped the photo over, 3 words were typed in a blunt, impersonal font. "Stay out of Harborview." It wasn't a warning, it was a sentence. Her breath caught. This wasn't a city, it was a territory. And she had just been told she was trespassing. She drove to the local precinct, her hands shaking so badly she kept the steering wheel in a white-knuckle grip. The Bureau of Citywide Security, the BCS, was housed in a squat concrete building that smelled of stale coffee and bureaucratic indifference. The desk sergeant, a man with a tired face and a thick mustache, looked at the photo, then at her EMT identification. His expression went flat. "Ma'am, this relates to the South Pier incident." "Yes," Mara said, her voice unsteady. "I was the first EMT on scene. I found this at my workplace this morning." The sergeant sighed, pushing the envelope back toward her with 2 fingers. "Look, Miss Delaney, this is a big case. It's way out of our jurisdiction. The AIC and the TFCA are handling the high-level stuff. We're just managing traffic and cleaning up the glass. But this is a direct threat against me, at my bakery." "And I understand that," he said, lowering his voice. "We'll file a report. We'll take your statement. But frankly, my advice is to just keep your head down. Don't talk to anyone about what you saw." "I didn't see anything," she insisted. "They don't know that," he said, his eyes filled with a weary honesty. "These aren't people you report to the BCS." He was telling her, in no uncertain terms, that the city police were afraid. That night, she was back in ambulance 64, the city lights sliding past the windows. Her nerves were raw. Every shadow seemed to lengthen. Every passing car a potential threat. At 9:05, the radio crackled, requesting medical assistance, Halcyon Hotel, penthouse suite, VIP caller, minor laceration, non-critical. The Halcyon, the glittering spear of glass and steel that towered over the old port, a symbol of the new money Viscari Holdings had brought to Harborview. They were met in the lobby, not by hotel staff, but by 2 men in dark, impeccably tailored suits. They were guided to a private elevator, which ascended with a smooth, silent rush. Her partner, Josh, whistled lowly, eyeing the polished mahogany walls. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse suite. It was less an apartment than a 2-story cavern of glass, offering a 180-degree view of the harbor. And he was there. Calder Viscari was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city lights as if they were a map of his own design. He was not in the blood-stained suit from the previous night. He wore dark trousers and a simple, dark gray Henley that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. Eli Mercer stood near a wet bar, his back to the room, speaking in a low growl into his phone. Calder turned as she entered. Those steel gray eyes, the ones she remembered from the wreckage, found her instantly. There was no surprise, just a flicker of dark recognition. "Miss Delaney," he stated. It was not a question. "Mr. Viscari," Mara kept her voice professional, clicking her pen. "We received a call about a laceration." Eli Mercer started to move forward, holding a digital tablet. "You'll need to sign this non-disclosure agreement before—" "Eli," Calder said, his voice quiet but absolute, "that won't be necessary." Eli froze, his disapproval a palpable force in the room, but he stepped back. Calder gestured to a heavy, shattered crystal decanter on the marble floor. It slipped. "My hand." He held up his left hand, the one that hadn't been bleeding last night, a shallow, clean cut angled across his palm. "Please, have a seat," Mara said, gesturing to a leather couch. "I'll need to clean that and see if it requires stitches." He sat, watching her as she knelt and opened the medkit. The silence in the room was heavy. As she snapped on a fresh pair of gloves and unwrapped a sterile wipe, Calder's gaze dropped from her face to her arm. He focused on her right wrist. A dark, mottled bruise, the size of a silver dollar, was spreading just above the line of her glove. She hadn't even noticed it until this morning. She remembered, in the chaos after the sniper, scrambling back into the ambulance, the heavy, primary gurney had slipped its latch, and the metal safety bar had slammed against her wrist. Calder Viscari's eyes narrowed. The ambient light in the room seemed to dim. The steel in his gaze darkened, sharpening to a fine, dangerous point. He slowly lifted his uninjured hand, his fingers hovering an inch above her skin, not touching, but the heat from his hand was immediate. His voice was a low, guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate the very air between them. "Who touched you?" The room went silent. Eli Mercer, across the room, stopped his phone call mid-sentence. The two security men by the elevator tensed, their hands instinctively moving to their jackets. The absolute lethal seriousness in his tone was so jarring that Mara almost smiled. This man, the target of a sniper ambush, the center of a federal investigation, was focused on a simple workplace bruise. "It was an accident," Mushy said, her voice steady, though her heart suddenly hammered against her ribs. "At work, the gurney slipped its latch. It's nothing." Calder held her gaze for a long, heavy second, his eyes searching hers, as if parsing the truth of her statement. A soft whumph. The massive, ornate chandelier hanging 20 feet above them tinkled, its crystals swaying. Mara looked up, frowning. Calder did not look up. His head snapped toward the windows, toward the rival hotel tower across the dark expanse. Thwack! A small, star-shaped fracture appeared on the reinforced glass of the penthouse window. 6 feet to Mara's left, a spider web of cracked glass, a suppressed gunshot. Calder Vescari did not shout. He did not move. He snapped his fingers. The sound was sharp, louder than the bullet's impact. Eli was already moving. Lockdown Kilo team. Terrace locked the elevators, code black. Heavy steel security shutters began to descend over the massive windows, sealing them in, plunging the room into artificial twilight. Mara was frozen, kneeling on the floor, a bloody wipe in one hand. Calder Vescari rose to his feet, a shadow of cold fury. He looked down at her. "You are no longer safe. The moment you were seen with me, you became a target." She had been pulled into his world, and the door had just slammed shut behind her. The ride from the Halcyon Hotel was a blur of silent, armored speed. Mara was wedged in the back of a black SUV that felt more like a bank vault than a vehicle. Calder Vescari sat beside her, a wall of stillness and contained power. Eli Mercer rode shotgun, speaking in low, coded phrases into a satellite phone. "This is kidnapping," Mara finally choked out, her voice tight with suppressed panic. "You cannot just take me. I have a son." "Your son is being picked up as we speak," Calder said, his voice level, his gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window. "No, you can't." She lunged for the handle, but there was none. The interior was smooth, featureless. "He will be brought to you," Calder continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "You were both targeted tonight. You at the Halcyon, him at your apartment." The SUV descended into a private, subterranean garage, the doors sealed behind them with a heavy, pneumatic hiss. This was not a parking structure. It was a bunker. Calder led her to a private elevator. When the doors opened, she was not in a lobby. She was in his home. The Vescari penthouse was a fortress suspended in the sky. It occupied the top 3 floors of the Vescari Tower. The glass was not just glass, it was thick, laminated, and, she assumed, bulletproof. A vast open living space was dominated by a 3-story view of Harborview, but it felt sterile, observed rather than lived in. "I will not be held here," and Mara insisted, her feet planted on the black marble floor. "You are not being held," Calder said. He walked to a desk and picked up a single sheet of paper. It was a high-resolution copy of the photograph she had received that morning, the one of her on the bridge. "This was delivered to the Fox and Flower," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "They know where you work. They know who you are. The shot at the Halcyon was not for me. It was to warn you, or to warn me, using you." The elevator chimed, the doors opened, and Eli Mercer walked in, holding a sleeping Finn in his arms, her son, his face peaceful, his small hand clutching the strap of his robot-themed backpack. Mara's breath left her. A primal scream built in her throat, but she choked it down, rushing forward to take him. Eli handed him over with a surprising, practiced gentleness. "He was asleep," Eli said, his voice gruff. "We were quiet. His bedroom is secure." Mara clutched Finn, burying her face in his hair, inhaling the familiar scent of milk and crayons. The terror solidified into a cold, hard knot of rage. She turned on Calder. "How dare you?" "I am ensuring his safety." Calder gestured to a hallway. "He has a room. We anticipated this." Finn stirred, blinking. "Mom, where are we?" His eyes focused on the room, growing wide with awe. "Whoa, is this a spaceship?" Calder watched the boy. Something like it. He led them down a hall. He opened a door not to a bedroom, but to a workshop. It was a wonderland. Soldering stations, wire spools, drafting tables, and dozens of shelves filled with model robots, gears, and advanced kits. Finn's jaw dropped. "This," Calder said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, "was my room when I was a boy." Finn, still in Mara's arms, pointed. "Is that a Kuka arm assembly? A real one?" Mara put him down, and Finn ran to the workbench, his fear gone, replaced by pure, 8-year-old ecstasy. Mara watched him, her resolve fracturing. This man had, in one move, terrified her and given her son his ultimate dream. "This is a gilded cage," she whispered, turning back to Calder. "It is a fortress," he corrected. "The AIC, the TFCA. They will be crawling all over your life by morning. They will try to use you. They will try to leverage your son to make me cooperate. Here." "They cannot reach you. This is not coercion," he said, his steel gray eyes locking onto hers. "It is protection." "I am not your prisoner," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I have a job, 2 jobs. I have a life." "You will keep your life. You will go to your shifts. Eli will arrange transport. You will have security. You will maintain your independence." He paused. "But you will sleep here, you and Finn, until this is over." "Dawn," Eli Mercer's voice cut in. He had been standing by the elevator, his face a mask of disapproval. "A civilian, a child, in the inner perimeter. It is a breach of every protocol." "It is my protocol," Calder said, not looking at Eli. His gaze remained fixed on Mara. "My perimeter. My breach." Eli's jaw tightened. The seed of dissent was planted, visible to anyone who cared to look. The first dinner was a silent, agonizing affair. They ate at a massive glass table. Finn was vibrating with excitement about the workshop. Mara picked at her food, her stomach in knots. Calder ate with a methodical, silent focus. The tension was a living thing, a third person at the table. After the plates were cleared by a silent housekeeper, Calder stood. He walked not to the wall of windows, but to a gleaming black grand piano tucked in an alcove. He sat down and he played. The music filled the sterile silence. It was not classical, not jazz. It was Harborview. The melody was melancholic, full of complex, unresolved chords that spoke of fog and cold water and isolated lights in a vast darkness. It was beautiful and deeply sad. Finn, drawn by the sound, slid off his chair and crept toward the piano, watching Calder's large, scarred hands move over the keys. Mara watched, too. This was the man who commanded snipers, who was hunted by federal agents, who had just upended her entire existence. And he played with a raw, aching vulnerability that cracked her anger. Leaving her confused, she softened, just a fraction, against her will. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text. She checked it. It was just a reminder from her utility company. Then a different sound, a tinny, digital chime. Finn's phone, the simple, cheap flip phone she had given him for emergencies, which he kept in his backpack. She picked it up, a new message from an unknown number. Her blood turned to ice. It was a picture, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. The front entrance of Finn's elementary school, A thin, red line was digitally drawn from the crosswalk where the bus stopped, all the way to the front doors. Below the image, one line of text. He walks alone, not for long. Mara dropped the phone as if it were burning. The moral line she had drawn in her mind, the one separating her, a healer, a mother from him, a criminal vaporized, it no longer mattered. The only line that mattered now was survival. Calder had stopped playing. He was watching her, his expression grim. He knew. "I'll stay," she said, her voice hollow. He nodded once. He pressed an intercom. "Tova, my location." A minute later, a woman entered the room. She was tall, with a lean, athletic build and dark hair pulled into a severe knot. Her eyes were an intelligent, watchful brown. She moved with a silent, economic grace. "This is Tova Rains," Calder said. "She will be your and Finn's personal security advisor. She's head of my close quarters detail. While you are here, she answers to you." Tova inclined her head. "Miss Delaney, Finn." Mara looked at this man, this Don. He was the source of the poison, and he was, infuriatingly, the only one offering the antidote. The tension between her revulsion at his world and the primal, undeniable magnetism of his protection pulled taut. It was a dangerous, suffocating, and thrilling sensation, and it was just beginning. The rain began just after midnight, a hard, driving assault against the penthouse glass. A storm was rolling in off the Atlantic, and the lights in the massive apartment flickered twice, unsettling the shadows. Mara could not sleep. The artificial silence of the soundproofed fortress was more deafening than the sirens of her real life. She pulled on a thin sweater and slid open the heavy glass door to the balcony. The wind hit her instantly, cold and wet, plastering her thin sleep shirt to her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself, looking down at Harborview, a city of blurred, distant lights. She did not hear him approach. The door slid open and shut, but she only knew he was there when a heavy weight settled on her shoulders. It was a cashmere overcoat, absurdly luxurious and impossibly warm. It smelled of him a clean, sharp scent of ozone, expensive wool, and something uniquely masculine. "You will catch a cold," Calder said. His voice was a low rumble beneath the howl of the wind. He stood beside her, not touching, separated by a respectable foot of space, yet his presence dominated the balcony. "You should not be awake," she murmured, pulling the coat tighter. "Neither should you," he replied. They were quiet for a long time, watching the storm. "My husband, David," Mara said, the words tasting strange in this new, dangerous air. "He died 3 years ago. Sepsis. A simple infection after surgery. It happened so fast." She took a shaky breath, the wind stealing it from her lips. He left. He left a mountain of medical debt, the kind you never climb out from under. I worked 2 jobs, and I am still drowning." Calder looked at the container port, his port lit by flashes of lightning. "My father," he said, his voice flat. "My adoptive father. He was a longshoreman. He found me at the docks when I was 12. He taught me how to read a shipping manifest before I could properly read a book. He died on Pier 9. A container chain snapped." Calder's voice hardened. "Or it was helped." A sudden, violent gust of wind swept across the balcony, whipping Mara's hair across her face. She raised a hand to push it away, turning her body slightly. The movement pulled the sleeve of her sweater up just an inch. Lightning flashed again, a brilliant, cold strobe of white, illuminating her arm. Calder, who missed nothing, went rigid. His gaze locked onto her upper arm, near the shoulder. A fresh bruise, ugly and dark purple, was blooming on her skin. It was distinct from the one on her wrist. "That was not the gurney," he said. His voice was no longer soft. It was the voice from the halcyon. Mara touched it, wincing. "It's nothing. A rough rescue today. The harness. A construction worker fell 2 stories. I had to strap in to get him stabilized on the gurney lift." He had asked who touched her. She had explained the first bruise. Now, here was a new one. Proof that her life, Her other life as a healer was just as violent as his. The space between them evaporated. He did not move fast, but with a deliberate, unstoppable gravity. His hand, the one that was not cut, came up. His fingers did not touch the bruise, but hovered over it, radiating a heat that had nothing to do with the coat. "You live in a world of constant damage," he whispered. His other hand, the one he had cut on the decanter, settled on her hip. It was not a caress. It was an anchor, a claim. It held her steady against the wind, and it staked a territory. Her breath hitched. His breathing, usually so controlled, was now audible, a counter-rhythm to the rain. He lowered his head. She should have stepped back. She should have run. She was a mother. He was a criminal. But his hand on her hip was the first solid thing she had felt in days, and his eyes were not cold now. They were burning. "Mara," he breathed, and it was the first time he had used her name when they were alone. She tilted her chin up. It was all the invitation he needed. The first touch of his lips was hesitant, almost a question. It was shockingly soft for a man so hard. She tasted the storm and the faintest hint of the expensive scotch she had seen him drink earlier. Her own lips parted on a sharp inhale. That inhale shattered his control. The kiss deepened, becoming firm, demanding, and utterly consuming. It was not a gentle exploration. It was a drowning. His hand moved from her hip, sliding up her back, pulling her flush against the hard lines of his body. The coat fell away, forgotten, pooling at their feet. Her hands came up, not to push him away, but to grip his shoulders, her fingers digging into the thick muscle. He backed her against the warm glass of the balcony door, shielding her from the wind with his own body. She felt the vibration of his heart thundering against her own. His fingers laced with hers, pinning her hand against the glass. It was a kiss of desperation, of two isolated souls colliding in the dark. It was about control and the absolute loss of it. Her mind screamed danger, but her body, starved of touch, of safety, of strength, melted against him. It was she who broke it. She turned her head, gasping, her forehead resting against his jaw, her chest heaving. The air was electric. He was ready to continue, to take this to the place it was inevitably going. "Calder!" she panted, her voice trembling. "Wait!" He froze, his body rigid. "I cannot," she whispered, and the words were ripped from her. "I cannot do this. Not like this. I need to trust you first. I do not even know who you are." He did not release her, but the crushing pressure of his embrace eased. He rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the cold air. She could feel the tremor in his hands. He was fighting a war with himself, and she was the battlefield. Finally, he nodded once. A sharp, pained movement. "All right," he breathed. It was a promise, a ceasefire. The next morning, the penthouse was silent. The storm had passed, leaving Harborview scrubbed clean and gleaming in the sharp autumn sunlight. Mara woke up on the couch, wrapped in his coat, which she must have pulled back on after he left. She walked into the kitchen, her heart pounding, expecting she did not know what. Calder was there, dressed in a simple t-shirt and sweats. He was at the high-end espresso machine, and Finn was at the counter, watching him. "He's making hot chocolate," Finn announced, his eyes wide. "From real chocolate. Mom, not powder, he melted it." Calder turned, a steaming mug in each hand. He passed one to Finn. His eyes met Mara's. The intensity of the night was gone, replaced by a strange, quiet calm. He seemed lighter. Mara's face flushed hot red. She was acutely aware of her rumpled clothes and storm-tangled hair. Calder simply raised an eyebrow, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, and nodded toward the third mug he was preparing. "Cocoa?" he asked, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. The domestic moment was shattered when Eli Mercer entered, Tova Raines at his side. They both stopped short, taking in the scene: the dawn, the woman, the child, the hot chocolate. Eli's face soured. "Dawn," he said, his voice clipped. "We have a problem. Intel just confirmed. Albright is moving. There is a meeting tonight at Pier 13. Eli's eyes cut to Mara. A Ravenlight meeting, he added, the word landing like a stone in the sunlit kitchen. Calder's brief, strange calm vanished. The steel returned. He looked from Eli to Mara and back again. Get the team ready. Pier 13 was a graveyard of forgotten cargo. It was the oldest, most dilapidated pier in Harborview, jutting a quarter-mile into the black, oily water. The only illumination came from tall sodium vapor lamps that cast a diseased, buzzing orange glow over everything, making the fog look like toxic smoke. Mara was not supposed to be there. She was crouched behind a stack of rusted shipping pallets, her heart hammering a desperate, uneven rhythm against her ribs. She was wearing a lightweight tactical vest Tova Raines had forced her into, but it felt alien and wrong. In her hands, she clutched the familiar weight of a fully stocked trauma bag. It was the only part of this world that made sense. You are medical support only. Tova had briefed her in the armored car, her voice a low, precise monotone. You do not move unless I move you. Your only job is to stay alive. If we are compromised, your evacuation route is the East End loading dock. There is a ladder to a service boat. You take the boat. You do not wait. Calder and his team, Eli, Tova, and a half-dozen other men who moved with the silent, lethal grace of panthers were positioned near a massive 40-foot container. It was painted a dull, nondescript gray. According to Calder's intel, this was the Ravenlight meeting. This was where his rival, Albright, was moving a shipment of weapons. With a loud groan of metal, Eli and another man pulled the heavy locking bars. The container doors swung open. There was no sound of shifting cargo, no smell of gun oil or chemicals, just a low, electronic hum. Inside, bathed in the container's own eerie blue light, were not crates, but rows upon rows of computer servers, fans whirring, thousands of tiny green and blue lights blinking in the darkness. "What is this?" Eli growled, stepping forward. "A server farm," Calder said, his voice quiet, his eyes scanning the setup. "A mobile one? He's not moving weapons. He's washing cryptocurrency. Millions, right under our noses." As if summoned by the revelation, a new set of lights appeared at the far end of the pier, flashing blue, not Harborview PD, the distinct, aggressive pulse of the AIC. 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop, pinning Calder's team in the harsh glare of their headlights. A tall, thin man in an expensive suit, his hair perfectly coiffed despite the wet air, stepped out. Supervisor Rowan Hale. "Calder Viscari," Hale called out, his voice amplified by a small bullhorn. "Quite the operation you have here. Pity it's not yours." "Hale!" Calder called back, his voice cutting through the night air without effort. He stepped into the light, his hands empty and visible at his sides. "Here's the situation," Hale said, walking forward alone. "Albright is my target. I don't care about your ancient family feuds, but this." He gestured to the glowing container. "This is a federal matter. I have a team ready to breach, or you can help me clean the house. Give me Albright, and this little crypto bank disappears. A loss of cargo fire." Eli Mercer tensed. Stepping to Calder's side. "Dawn, no, we don't make deals. The family does not shake hands with the feds. It's poison." "The poison is already in the system, Eli," Calder said, his eyes locked on Hale. He was pragmatic. This was business. "Hale gets Albright, we get our port back. We have a deal." The moment the words left Calder's mouth, the orange sodium lights high above them popped. All 4 of them, in perfect sequence. The pier was plunged into near total darkness, illuminated only by the distant city, the AIC headlights, and the blue glow of the server farm. "Tova!" Eli yelled, his hand flying to his weapon. "See, cams are dark." Tova's voice crackled over the comms in Mara's ear. "All feeds cut, ghost team. It's a setup." The first shot was a heavy, deafening crack. It came from the darkness, from a stack of containers to their right. A man beside Mara, One of Calder's guards grunted, a wet, tearing sound. He collapsed, his hand clutching his throat as blood pumped, hot and black in the dim light, between his fingers. Mara didn't think. She didn't wait for Tova. She was already moving, sliding on her knees through the gravel and oil, her trauma bag thumping against her back. "Pressure, I need pressure on the wound," she yelled, her EMT voice taking command. She ripped open a chest seal packet with her teeth as gunfire erupted from all sides. It was a full-blown ambush. Albright's men were hidden, entrenched. She reached the man. He was gurgling, his eyes wide with panic. "I've got you! I've got you!" she chanted, pushing his hands away to shove a mass of gauze against the wound. A new figure appeared in her peripheral vision, a gunman, rising from behind a concrete barrier, leveling his weapon directly at her. She had no time to scream. A body slammed into hers, a solid wall of muscle and heat, driving her down onto the pavement, his weight covering her completely. Calder. He had thrown himself over her, a human shield, the world dissolved. A hail of bullets hammered the concrete around them, pinging off the metal container just inches away. She was crushed beneath him, her face pressed against his chest, her hands still locked on her patient's neck. She could feel the thud, thud, thud of his heart, a frantic, powerful drum against her cheek. She could smell the gunpowder in his clothes and the sharp, metallic tang of his adrenaline. The sound of the battle went distant and muffled, as if she were underwater. Her entire universe shrank to the man covering her, his body a living, breathing fortress. "Tova, cover, fire, move," Calder roared, the sound vibrating through his chest into her ear. He grabbed the collar of her vest and hauled her to her feet, shoving her toward the water. "Go now, Mara." Eli and Tova laid down a disciplined spray of suppressing fire. Mara, Calder, and the two remaining guards ran, half carrying the wounded man, toward the end of the pier. The tugboat Aurora was moored there, a last-ditch escape plan Tova had arranged. They tumbled onto the deck, and Calder slashed the mooring lines with a knife. The boat's engine roared to life. As they chugged away from the pier, a deafening explosion lit up the night, the server farm. A secondary charge. Fire bloomed, a massive orange flower consuming the container, the evidence, and the firefight. They had left just enough wreckage for Hale to pin on Albright. Mara was shaking, her hands covered in the blood of a man she did not know. Calder was at the railing, his back to her, breathing hard. Her phone, tucked deep in her jeans pocket, buzzed, a vibration against her skin. She pulled it out, her bloody thumb smearing the screen. A new message, an unknown number. "Stop touching him if you want your son to come home from school." She did not wait until they were back in the penthouse. The moment the armored elevator doors hissed shut, sealing them in the silent ascent. Mara rounded on him. Her hands, still stained with the faint, coppery smell of another man's blood, were clenched into fists. She shoved her phone at his chest, the screen glowing with the threat. "Stop touching him," she read, her voice a low, vibrating blade of fury. "That's what it says. Because of you. Because you threw yourself on top of me. Because I am your liability." Calder looked at the screen, his face unreadable. "I am not your emotional hostage," Mara spat, her terror finally boiling over into rage. "You cannot use my son as a pawn. You brought me into this fortress to protect me, but you just put a target on my child's back." "Yes," Calder said, his voice quiet. The simple agreement stopped her cold. "Yes." "I made you visible," he said, his steel gray eyes meeting hers. "The elevator doors open to the dark penthouse, and I will make him invisible." He had a plan. He always had a plan. The next morning, a private car, accompanied by Tova Raines, took Mara and Finn 2 hours north, deep into the Berkshire Mountains. They arrived at a campus of glass and cedar nestled in a private valley, surrounded by a perimeter fence that looked more military than educational. Blue Forge STEM Camp. It is the most secure private educational facility on the coast, Calder had explained. The children of diplomats, executives, and others. They specialize in robotics. He will have the best engineers in the Vascari Aerospace Division as his tutors. Mara knelt, hugging Finn so tightly he grunted. You be good, Finnbug. You listen to Tova. Am I in trouble? Finn asked, looking at the impressive gates. No, sweetie, Mara whispered, her throat aching. You're on an adventure. That night, the penthouse felt impossibly empty. The silence was heavy, missing the sound of Finn's sketching and quiet questions. A video call chimed on the large living room screen. Mara lunged for the accept button. Finn's face appeared, beaming, magnified 10 feet tall. Mom, look. He was in a workshop that made Calder's look like a hobbyist's garage. They're letting me use the 5-axis printer, and I met Mr. Aris. He's a real engineer, and we're building a fully articulated robotic arm. Mara laughed, tears of relief blurring her vision. That's amazing, baby. A shadow moved behind Finn on the screen. Calder had walked into the penthouse, and his image was now mirrored on the call, as he had apparently patched himself in from his office. Finn, Calder said, his voice clear over the speakers. Mister, Calder, hi. Finn grabbed a plastic prototype. I'm having trouble with the load-bearing joint. The actuator keeps slipping. Your torque ratio is off, Calder said immediately. You are using a standard servo, but you need a worm gear drive. It will prevent backdrive and hold the load. Mara watched, stunned into silence. Calder, the Don, the target of a federal investigation, was calmly discussing robotic engineering with her 8-year-old son. He was not just protecting Finn, he was engaging him. He was teaching him. A warm, terrifying, and complicated image flickered in her mind, the image of a father. The pressure came the next day. Mara was at the Fox and Flower, Tova sitting discreetly in a black sedan parked across the street. A man in a simple gray suit ordered a coffee. He left his cup on the counter. Tucked into the cardboard sleeve was a business card, Rowan Hale, AIC, on the back. In neat print, Allie, 5 minutes. Her heart hammered. She told her boss she needed air and slipped out the back. Hale was there, leaning against the brick wall, sheltered from the Harborview drizzle. Miss Delaney, thank you for coming. I know you're in a difficult position. I have nothing to say to you. I am not asking you to, Hale said, holding up his hands. I'm offering you a way out. I have looked at your finances, your late husband, David Delaney, the hospital bills, $470,000, plus interest. It's a life sentence. Mara felt cold. What do you want? A trade. You are inside. You are closer to him than anyone, and we need the real ledgers, the ones that tie Vascari to the Ravenlight protocol. Give us something tangible, anything, and I will personally see that your debt is wiped clean. A signature, a single pen stroke, and you are free. The temptation was a physical, sickening lurch in her stomach. Free, to take Finn and run, to not spend the next 30 years working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. She looked at Hale's clean, ambitious face. No, she said. No. He looked genuinely surprised. I won't be your informant. I won't be used by you, and I won't be used by him. I am an EMT. I save lives. I don't destroy them. She turned to leave. Think about it. Miss Delaney, he called after her. Think about what kind of life you could give your son. The seed was planted. It festered all night, a toxic, agonizing doubt. She confronted Calder when he returned, late, from a meeting. He was loosening his tie, the shadow of exhaustion on his face. Hale found me today, she said, her voice flat. He offered to erase David's debt if I sold you out. Calder stopped, his hands still at his collar. He did not look surprised. What did you tell him? I told him no. He held her gaze. Why? Because I don't know who the monster is anymore, she burst out. Is it him or is it you? All this. The cars, the penthouse, the guns. Is it all dirty? Calder walked to the window, looking down at the glittering, corrupt city he owned. Yes, he said. You don't deny it. It's the truth. This harbor is full of filth. Mara, human trafficking, narcotics, extortion. My adoptive father tried to fight it, to clean it, and they snapped a chain on him for his trouble." He turned back to her, his face a mask of cold resolve. "I do not try to clean it. I choose to control it. I control the filth so that men far worse than me, men like Albright, men who would sell anything to anyone, cannot. That is the choice I made. That is who I am." It was the most honest and the most terrifying thing he had ever said. The internal pressure was building, too. In the penthouse command center, Eli watched a silent security feed of Calder and Mara talking. Tova stood by the server rack, cleaning her weapon. "He's soft," Eli growled, his thumb jabbing at the monitor. "A woman makes a Dawn soft. He's sharing strategy. He's compromised." "He's focused," Tova said, not looking up. "She sees things we do not. She is not a liability. She is an asset." "She is a civilian," Eli countered, his eyes darkening with a possessive, dangerous glint. "And she is distracting him from the real threat." Tova watched him. It was not concern in Eli's eyes. It was jealousy. The real threat arrived an hour later. Tova's intel team got a breakthrough. "Rosewall Auction House," Tova announced, laying a tablet on the main table. Calder and Eli gathered. "It's the second laundering hub. Tonight, they're auctioning a 19th century painting. The painting itself is irrelevant. Its digital provenance, its chain of ownership is a fragmented crypto wallet containing Albright's main ledger." "Hale's unit will be all over it," Eli said. "He'll want a clean raid, no blood." "It's a black tie event," Tova said. "Security will be tighter than the Federal Reserve. We cannot go in heavy." "So we don't," Mara said. The three of them turned. She'd been standing in the doorway, listening. "You can't get guns in," Mara said, walking into the room. "But an ambulance can go anywhere. A gurney can get past any checkpoint." Eli scoffed. "This is not a television show, Miss Delaney." "A guest has a heart attack," Mara continued, her voice gaining strength, her tactical mind, the one that assessed chaos scenes, clicking into place. A no lights, no siren call to avoid a panic. I go in as the EMT. Tova goes as my partner. The patient is one of your men, the gurney. She tapped the tablet. Is our Trojan horse. The medical equipment bag carries your tech. No one, not even the AIC, will stop a paramedic trying to save a life. Eli was about to object, but Calder raised a hand. He studied Mara, a new appreciation in his eyes. She was not just a healer. She was a strategist. "Gather the captains," Calder said to Eli, gesturing to the secure video conferencing unit. "I want them to hear this." 5 minutes later, the faces of 6 Vescari captains, the ruling council of the syndicate, looked out from a bank of screens. Calder stood before them. "We have a plan for Rosewall. Miss Delaney," he said, gesturing for her to step forward. Eli's face was thunderous. In front of the entire syndicate, the Don was not just listening to an outsider, he was giving her the floor. The Rosewall Auction House was a cathedral of old money. Crystal chandeliers, 3 stories high, dripped light onto marble floors. The air was thick with the competing scents of expensive perfume and even more expensive champagne. A string quartet played a frantic, jazzy tune in the mezzanine. Mara's plan had been revised. Calder deemed the EMT approach too crude for this environment. It would attract the wrong kind of attention. The new plan required infiltration, not invasion. She was now Miss Lark, a name Tova had invented, supposedly a tech investor from Seattle. Her hair was swept up in an intricate knot, and she wore a backless midnight blue silk gown that felt like a whisper against her skin. A silver mask, delicate as a spider web, covered her eyes. She felt like an imposter, a sparrow in a flock of peacocks. Then Calder offered her his arm. He was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his mask a simple, severe black domino that did nothing to hide the lethal intensity of his gaze. He was not an imposter. He was the king, and this was just another of his courts. "You look correct. Miss Lark," he murmured, his thumb brushing the inside of her elbow, sending a jolt of heat straight through her. They moved through the crowd, a vortex of power. People parted for them. Eli Mercer was posted by the main entrance. Tova by the security hub. In the rafters, hidden AIC supervisor Rowan Hale and his team were watching, waiting for the trap to spring. The target was Lot 77, the harbor at dusk, a moody 19th century oil painting. It was valuable, but not this valuable. The whispers in the room were that the Vescari Dawn and an agent for the Albright Syndicate were about to engage in a bidding war. The painting's frame has a modified RFID chip, Calder whispered, his lips brushing her ear as he leaned in, pretending to point out a sculpture. The chip itself is the key. When it passes the auction house's digital checkpoint, it verifies the provenance. That signal is what we need to intercept. It's the first key to Albright's ledger. The string quartet shifted to a waltz, a slow, classic, and intimate tune. "Before we commit treason," Muscalder said, his voice a low rumble, "we should blend in." He turned, his hand moving from her elbow to the bare skin of her lower back. Her breath hitched. His palm was warm, strong, and possessive. It anchored her, just as it had on the balcony. He guided her to the center of the floor. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered, her hands finding his shoulders. "Look at me," he commanded, his other hand engulfing hers. "Listen to the music. I will do the rest." He moved, and she moved with him. He led with an effortless, predatory grace. The rest of the room blurred, the lights and noise fading to a dull hum. There was only the music, and the solid, warm wall of his chest, and the impossibly steel-gray eyes behind his mask. His hand on her back was a brand. Every nerve in her body was screamingly aware of each individual finger. He held her firmly, respectfully. Yet it was the most intimate touch she had ever known. Their heartbeats, she realized, were in perfect, frantic sync. "Hale is watching us," she whispered, a desperate attempt to break the spell. "I know," Calder breathed, his gaze dropping to her lips. Let him. Let them all watch. The heat between them was a furnace. He was going to kiss her. Here. In front of the AIC, his rivals, and the city's elite. He was going to claim her in the open. The auctioneer's gavel cracked like a gunshot, and now, "Ladies and gentlemen, Lot 77. The spell broke. The lights in the ballroom snapped off, plunging the hall into absolute, suffocating blackness. A woman screamed. There was a sound of shattering glass. Mara grabbed for Calder, but he was already moving, his hand a steel band on her wrist, pulling her through the chaos. "Tova status," he barked into a hidden comms piece. "They're not ours." Tova's voice was tight with effort. "Ghost team, service exit. They have the painting. I'm in pursuit." "They knew the plan," Calder growled, dragging Mara behind him. He didn't head for the exit. He kicked open a door marked "Staff Only" and pulled her into the narrow, fluorescent-lit service corridor. "This way." We cut them off at the stairs. They burst through a set of double doors into the concrete stairwell. Below them, Tova was grappling with a man in black tactical gear. Two other men were rushing down, the heavy, gilt-framed painting between them. "Calder, it's a setup," Tova yelled, disarming her opponent with a brutal snap to the elbow. The leader, the last man to come through the door, stopped. He raised a suppressed pistol. He was not aiming at Tova. He was aiming at Calder. He pulled off his black ski mask. Mara's blood went cold. It was Eli Mercer. "Eli," Calder breathed. The name was not a question. It was a statement of damnation. "You got soft, Dawn," Eli spat, his face a mask of jealous rage. "You let her in. You brought a civilian into the family. You, with your rules and your honor. Albright pays better. He understands that this is a business of dirt, not," he sneered, "controlling the filth." "You leaked the Ravenlight meat," Calder said, his voice dead. All emotion bled from it. "I leaked everything, the sniper on the bridge, the penthouse, Pier 13. I have been handing you to the AIC on a platter, piece by piece." Eli smiled, a terrible, thin smile. "And tonight, they get you both. Albright gets the ledger, I get the syndicate, and the feds get to close the case. A clean sweep." "You were my brother," Calder whispered. "You were a fool," Eli said, and he fired. He was not aiming at Calder. He fired at Tova, who was climbing the stairs toward him. The shot was clean, precise. Tova cried out, a sharp, pained sound, and collapsed on the landing, clutching her thigh as blood instantly pooled beneath her. Eli raised his weapon again, aiming for Calder's chest. "No!" Mara screamed, and she did the only thing she could. She grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall and hurled it. It missed Eli, but it clanged off the wall, and the distraction was enough. Calder charged, not as a billionaire, but as the dockyard brawler he was born to be. He slammed into Eli, and the two men, brothers in all but blood, tumbled down the concrete stairs. Mara scrambled down to Tova. She ripped off the silk shawl from her own shoulders and, with the practiced efficiency of an EMT, cinched it high on Tova's leg, creating a makeshift tourniquet. Her hands were shaking, but her knots were firm. "It's bad, Mara," Tova gasped, her face pale. "Arterial?" "Stay with me, Tova," Mara commanded, pressing all her weight onto the knot. Below, Calder had Eli pinned. He had the man's gun, and his face was a portrait of pure, cold murder. He was hesitating. This was the man he grew up with. Eli, pinned, just laughed, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It's done. Calder, it's all done." He fumbled for his own radio, clicking the button. "It's hot. Ravenlight concludes at Lighthouse Black Reef before dawn." The heavy doors at the top of the stairwell crashed open. "AIC, nobody move. Hands in the air. Hands in the air. Vescari." Rowan Hale stood there, flanked by a dozen agents in tactical gear. His gun was pointed directly at Calder. "On your knees. Vescari. All of you. You're done." Calder looked up. He saw Hale. He saw Eli, grinning in defeat. He saw Tova, bleeding out. And he saw Mara. Her blue silk dress now stained dark red, her face pale with terror but her hands steady on the wound. He made his choice. He grabbed Mara by the arm, yanking her away from Tova. "Run!" He didn't wait. He half threw her down the remaining flight of stairs. Ignoring Hale's shouts, they burst into the subterranean parking garage, a black, low-profile sedan. A vehicle that looked like a simple family car but was clearly armored sat waiting. Calder shoved Mara into the passenger seat as gunfire echoed from the stairwell behind them. He slid into the driver's side and hit a button. The engine turned over with a low, powerful growl as the car, built for exactly this, disappeared into the anonymous labyrinth of the city's tunnels. The armored sedan sliced through the back roads of Harborview, leaving the city lights behind and plunging into the coastal darkness. The storm, which had held off during the auction, now unleashed itself. Rain hammered the windshield, a deafening drum against the armor plating. The wipers fought a losing battle. Mara was still in the midnight blue silk gown, now ruined, stained with Tova's blood and the grime of the service corridor. Calder drove with a focused, silent fury, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "She's gonna be okay," Mara whispered, mostly to herself. "The tourniquet will hold until Hale's men process her." "Tova is a soldier," Calder said, his voice clipped. "She will survive." Mara looked at him, really looked at him in the dim, green glow of the dashboard. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a raw, aching clarity. His jaw was tight, but it was the small cut on his neck, just below the ear, that held her attention. A dark line of blood crept toward the collar of his ruined tuxedo shirt, a graze from the tumble with Eli. "You are bleeding," she said, her voice quiet. He just shook his head, his eyes fixed on the wet road. "It's nothing." "Pull over, Calder." "We do not have time." "Pull over," she insisted, her EMT voice emerging, "or I will grab the wheel. You're no good to anyone if you pass out." With a low curse, he wrenched the wheel and the heavy car slid to a stop in a muddy turnout. Surrounded by the black, thrashing silhouettes of pine trees, the world shrank to the small cabin, the sound of the rain, and their breathing. "It is a scratch," he growled. Stay still. She unbuckled, shifting on the leather seat to face him. The car's first aid kit was under the dash. She pulled it out, her hands surprisingly steady. She snapped on a pair of latex gloves from the kit. She leaned in close. The space was impossibly small. Her knee pressed against his thigh, the silk of her dress rustling. She ignored the jolt that went through both of them. She uncapped an antiseptic wipe. "This will sting," she murmured. She pressed the wipe to the cut. Calder hissed, a sharp intake of breath, his whole body tensing. His hand shot up, not to stop her, but to grip her wrist. His fingers were steel. "You," he whispered, his voice raw. "You stood in the chaos, at the bridge. You shielded that man with your own body. You did not run." Mara froze, her hand holding the wipe still pressed to his neck. His thumb was stroking the pulse point on the inside of her wrist. "You were not chosen because of a debt, Mara," he confessed, the words torn from him. "You were not a liability. You were chosen because you were the only other person on that bridge who was not afraid. You stood straight. You were still." The admission hung in the air, thick and potent. He was not looking at her wrist anymore. His eyes, silver in the dim light, were on her lips. The air in the car was too thin, too hot. She did not pull away. She finished cleaning the small wound, her movements slow, almost a caress. "You are reckless," she whispered. "And you are not," he replied. He did not pull her. He did not need to. She leaned in, and he met her. This kiss was not the desperate, storm-fueled collision on the balcony. This was a low, burning fire. It was a conscious choice. His hand left her wrist, moving to cup her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. Her free hand came up, pressing flat against the solid wall of his chest, feeling the frantic, heavy beat of his heart. It was a kiss of profound hunger, of two people who had seen the worst and found something solid in the wreckage. His lips were firm, demanding yet impossibly tender, tasting of rain and scotch and the metallic tang of adrenaline. She arched against him, her body, which had been frozen in terror, now melting with a different kind of fire. His other hand slid from the steering wheel, finding her waist, pulling her closer, half lifting her from her seat, her fingers tangled in his hair, her gloves forgotten. It was a deep, breathless, silent promise. He broke it first, pulling back just enough to rest his forehead against hers. His breathing was ragged, his eyes closed. "Not here," he breathed, his voice thick. "Not like this. Not in a car, running for our lives. When you are safe. When Finn is safe. I promise you." As if summoned, a screen on the dashboard lit up, an incoming encrypted video call. Calder stared at it, then hit accept. Finn's face, bright and beaming, filled the screen. "Mom, mister. Calder, look. I finished it." He was holding up the robotic arm, now fully assembled. As they watched, the small, articulated fingers twitched, opened, and then, impossibly, waved. "It works, mister. Aris let me use the micro-soldering kit." A smile, a genuine, unguarded smile, cracked Calder's grim expression. It transformed his face, erasing the dawn, leaving the man who built robots in his childhood. Mara's heart ached. The image of this, the three of them, a family, sharing a tiny moment of victory was a bright, painful flash of a life she could never have. "That is brilliant, Finn," Calder said, his voice almost normal. "The tension looks perfect. Good work." "I have to go. Mister, Aris says we are testing the load capacity. Bye, Mom, bye, Mr. Calder." The screen went dark. The silence that returned was heavier than before. The smile faded from Calder's face. The intimate, warm bubble had burst, leaving the cold reality. A new alert chimed, a secure, audio-only file. Calder played it. Tova's voice, strained and full of static, filled the car. "Dawn, I am clear. Backup team extracted me, but Eli is moving. He's using the Raven Light protocol as a summons. He's called a full captain's meeting at the Black Reef Lighthouse. He's telling them you are compromised by the feds. that you brought her into the inner circle. He is painting the AIC raid as your failure. It is a dethronement. Calder, he intends to have you executed by dawn. Calder's face was stone. There's more, Tova continued. Hale is not at the auction house. He's moving. His entire tactical unit is en route to Black Reef. He knows. He's letting Eli do the work for him. He wants to catch everyone Albright's men, and what's left of yours in one net. He wants to close the Vescari and Albright cases in one night. Calder put the car in gear. The engine roared. He controls the ground, Yo Calder said, pulling back onto the slick road. He has the lighthouse. He has the captains. He's expecting a dawn, Mara said, her mind racing, the tactical part of her brain, the part that organized chaos, taking over. He's expecting an assault. He's not expecting an EMT. She looked at the first aid kit. What else is in this car? The trunk. Standard survival gear. Why? Flares, cold packs, the chemical ones, a VHF radio. She was ticking items off on her fingers. Eli is holding a meeting. He needs order. We do not give him order. We give him panic. You create a diversion. I create a patient. We split his men. We use the storm. We use the dark. We use his own radio frequency to spread misinformation. Calder looked at her, his eyes sharp with a new, profound respect. Miss Delaney, you're full of surprises. They reached the cliffs overlooking the lighthouse. The structure was a black spear against the gray, stormy sky, its light cutting a lonely circle. Calder pulled the car into a hidden, rocky alcove, killing the engine. He turned to her. He removed a heavy black onyx signet ring from his own finger. This is not jewelry, he said, his voice grim. It is a key. It accesses a Vescari-held safe in every major bank on this continent. It opens 3 safe houses. It carries an identity. Clean, untraceable. He took her hand, the one that was not gloved, and pressed the heavy, cold ring into her palm. If I fall tonight, if Eli wins, I need you to do one thing for me. Calder, no. Promise me, he commanded, his grip tightening. If I tell you to run, you run. You take this. You get Finn from Blue Forge, and you disappear. You do not look back. You do not try to save me. You give your son the life he deserves. Promise me. She looked from the ring, heavy and cold in her hand, to his face, a mask of desperate, final resolve. She closed her fingers over the ring. I promise. Black Reef Lighthouse was a spear of granite against the raging Atlantic. The wind did not just blow, it screamed, a physical, high-pitched assault. Waves, black and monstrous, exploded against the rocks, sending tremors up the 150-foot structure. Inside the generator room at the base, it was a scene of tense, cold theater. 15 Vescari captains, the core of the syndicate, formed a grim semicircle. The air smelled of salt, damp stone, and fear. Eli Mercer, his face slick with rain and sweat, paced before them. He's broken, Eli yelled over the storm. He brought a civilian into his home. He compromised the Rosewall op. He is weak, soft, and he is dragging this family into a federal grave. We need a new Vescari, one that is not afraid to get its hands dirty, one that is not, he sneered, bound. Some captains nodded, their loyalty clearly bought. Others shifted, their eyes uncertain, caught between tradition and mutiny. Outside, crouched behind a barrier of jagged rocks, Mara shivered, the silk of her ruined gown offering no protection. She clutched a Vescari band radio, her knuckles white. Calder was a shadow 20 yards away, watching the entrance. Mara keyed the comms, switching to the frequency Tova had identified as Eli's command channel. She pitched her voice high, forcing panic into it. This is AIC Unit 4. I am cut off. Hale is rogue, repeat. Supervisor Hale is working for Albright. He is here to execute everyone. His only targets are Vescari and the digital ledger. He's wiping the slate. She cut the signal. Inside the lighthouse. The radio on Eli's belt squawked. The captains flinched. Eli's men looked at each other. The seed of paranoia planted. The heavy oak door of the lighthouse groaned open, slammed back by the wind. Calder Vescari stood in the doorway. He was unarmed. He was soaked to the skin. His hands were empty and visible. "Eli!" His voice was not loud, but it cut through the gale like a razor. Eli spun, his men raising their weapons. "You bring guns," Calder asked, his gaze sweeping over the captains, ignoring Eli. "You challenge me with an ambush. This is not our way." He stepped inside, his ruined tuxedo dripping on the stone floor. He shrugged off the jacket, letting it fall. By the old laws, the laws of the harbor, a challenge for leadership is met face to face. I invoke the judgment. He looked directly at Eli. "Bare knuckle. You and me. The family will have its answer." Eli laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You're a fool, old man." But the captains were watching. This was the code. To refuse was to admit he was a coward, a traitor. "Fine," Eli spat. He tossed his pistol to a subordinate. The fight was not a brawl. It was an execution. Eli was fast, fueled by years of resentment. He met Calder's cold precision with raw, brutal strength. Calder landed a heavy blow to Eli's ribs, but Eli countered, ducking under Calder's arm and driving his elbow into Calder's side. Calder staggered, and Eli swept his leg, sending the Don crashing to the stone floor. Eli was on him instantly, his hands clamping around Calder's throat. "It's over," he roared, slamming Calder's head against the floor. "The family is mine." Mara, watching from the cracked doorway, saw Calder's face begin to darken. She ripped the chemical cold pack from the first aid kit in her hand, smashing it against the stone wall. The bag activated. "Eli!" she screamed. He looked up, his eyes wide with fury at the interruption. In that second, Mara threw the activated pack. It hit the wall just above his head and ruptured, exploding in a pressurized cloud of freezing, white vapor, a perfect, blinding smokescreen. Calder did not pause. He exploded upward from beneath the choking, disoriented Eli. He did not punch, in one fluid, brutal motion. He snapped Eli's arms back and cinched a heavy-duty zip tie, a relic from his own jacket, around his wrists. The main door crashed open again. "Freeze AIC, nobody moves." Supervisor Rowan Hale stood there, flanked by his tactical team, assault weapons leveled. "Well, well," Hale sneered. "The rat's in the trap." He fired 2 rounds into the ancient ceiling. "On your knees, all of you." "Hale," one of his own junior agents said, his voice tense. "This is a capture mission, sir, not a—" "Shut up, Agent," Hale snapped. "I'm closing this file. I have been on Albright's payroll for a year. He wanted a clean house. He wanted the Don, and he wanted the traitor." Hale raised his rifle, aiming it squarely at Calder's chest. "And I always deliver." A deafening crunch echoed from beneath their feet. The entire lighthouse shook, throwing everyone off balance. Tova, bleeding but functional, had rammed the backup extraction boat at full throttle into the rotted, load-bearing pier columns beneath the lighthouse. At the exact same instant, Eli's tactical phone, the one on his belt, began to ring. It was an anonymous ghost call, the Viscari engineers at the STEM camp, Finn's hack. Eli's men, already panicked by Mara's radio call, rocked by the explosion, and seeing the ghost call an old Viscari code for a catastrophic breach, broke rank. They thought the building was coming down. They ran for the door. In the chaos, Mara ran, not for the exit, but for a rusted cast-iron maintenance panel on the far wall. One Calder had pointed out on the drive. She pressed the heavy onyx ring into a small, hidden indentation. A heavy click. The panel swung open. Inside was a small, waterproof Pelican case. She opened it. A solid-state hard drive and a small, battery-powered projector. Hale was screaming for order. Calder was fending off one of Eli's panicked guards. Mara aimed the projector at the wide, curved inner wall of the lighthouse. She hit the power button. An image, 10 feet high, flared to life, bank statements, offshore accounts, wire transfers from Albright-owned shells to Rowan Hale, then audio. "Just kill them both." Hale's voice, captured from the auction house, echoed through the room. Hale's own team froze. They stared at the wall. They heard the proof. The radio on the floor squawked. It was Albright, his voice tinny and enraged. "He failed, kill the woman. She has the ledger, kill the EMT. Eli, do this and all is forgiven." Eli, cuffed but desperate, saw his chance. He lunged, kicking a pistol dropped by one of his fleeing men. He got his hands on it, twisting his cuffed body, and aimed at Mara. No. Tova, who had dragged herself inside, threw her body in front of Mara. The shot was deafening. Tova cried out, a sharp, choked sound, as the bullet slammed into her shoulder. Spinning her around, she collapsed. Calder Vescari turned. He saw Mara, safe. He saw Tova on the ground, bleeding for her a second time. The icy control that defined him shattered into a million pieces. A primal, guttural roar ripped from his chest, a sound that was not human. "Who touched you?" He crossed the room in 2 bounds, ignoring the guns. He grabbed Eli by the front of his shirt and lifted him, cuffed, off the ground. He slammed him against the stone wall. Eli's head snapped back, and his world went black. A massive wave, driven by the storm and the crippled foundation, shattered the lower windows. Freezing Atlantic water flooded the room. Hale's junior agents, seeing the proof on the wall, hearing their boss give the execution order, made their choice. They turned, as one unit, and seized their supervisor. "Rowan Hale, you are under arrest for conspiracy and attempted murder." Eli was unconscious and cuffed. Hale was disarmed and screaming. The remaining Vescari captains stood in knee-deep, freezing water, utterly defeated. The storm broke as the first, fragile light of dawn bled over the Atlantic. The sky turned from black to a bruised purple, then to a watery, hopeful gray. The screaming wind softened to a mournful sigh. Red and blue lights arrived, but they were not Hale's. A new, legitimate AIC task force, summoned by Tova's backup team, secured the perimeter. Ambulances followed. Mara, her silk dress in tatters and stiff with drying blood, refused to be treated. She was in the back of an ambulance, her hands no longer shaking, her EMT training a solid, steady rock beneath the terror. She was placing the final, neat sutures on Tova's shoulder wound. The bullet had passed clean through. "Your stitches are better than mine," Tova murmured, her face pale but her eyes sharp. "You should have stayed in the boat," Mara whispered, tying off the knot. "And missed the party," Tova almost smiled. "You chose well, Mara." Supervisor Rowan Hale was led out in cuffs, his face a mask of disbelief, his protests drowned by the surf. The digital ledger from the lighthouse safe, combined with the encrypted audio, was an open and shut case. Within hours, the Albright syndicate, decapitated and exposed, began to crumble. The simultaneous threat to Harborview was over. 2 days later, the Vescari captains met, not in a secret bunker, but in the vast, cold space of the Glassworks warehouse. Sunlight streaming through the dusty skylights. The mood was somber. There was no traditional cleansing. There was no bloody consolidation of power. Calder Vescari, his arm in a simple black sling from the fight, stood before them. He did not talk of revenge. He spoke of his adoptive father. He spoke of a new way. That afternoon, they signed the Harborview Compact. It was an agreement witnessed by the city's most powerful to end the syndicate's laundering operations. The money would be redirected, funneled through the newly created Greenport Foundation, a civilian-run fund to reconstruct the decaying piers and modernize the city. It was a masterful pivot. To the public, Calder Vescari was not a Don. He was a reformer, a ruthless billionaire who had seen the light, a perfect American redemption story. He was legitimizing his empire, moving his family from the shadows into the sun. Mara was there when Eli, in a federal orange jumpsuit, was being transferred for his sentencing. He saw her standing near the courthouse steps. He stopped, his face hollowed out. "He's weak, you know," Eli rasped, the guards pulling at his arms. "A Don who falls in love is a Don who will fall." Mara met his dead gaze. "No," she said, her voice clear and steady. "He's a Don who finally chose to stand upright." That evening, she was on the penthouse balcony. The air was soft, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. Finn was in the workshop, his happy chatter echoing faintly through the open glass. Calder came to stand beside her. He was silent for a long time, just watching the city he was reshaping. He took her hand, the one that had held Tova's wound, the one that had thrown the smoke bomb. He turned it over and pressed his lips to the back of her knuckles. It was a gesture of such profound reverence it made her heart ache. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He took the heavy, black onyx signet ring from her finger. He placed it in the box and snapped it shut. The sound was final. This, he said, was a key, an escape plan, a way to run. He then produced a second ring. It was not a diamond. It was a simple, matte finish platinum band, heavy and solid. He slid it onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. This, he whispered, his thumb stroking her hand, is also a key, not for running. This one is only for coming home, a return code. Mara looked at the ring, then at his face. Calder. Mom, mister, Calder, look. Finn burst onto the balcony, his face shining with triumph. He held up his robotic arm. It was no longer a prototype. It was painted a sleek, metallic blue. As they watched, the small, articulated fingers precisely plucked a single flower from a pot on the balcony and offered it to Mara. Mara took it, tears welling in her eyes. Finn, that's incredible. Calder did not pat the boy on the head. He knelt, slowly, his injured arm making the movement stiff until he was eye to eye with the 8-year-old. Finn, Calder said, his voice serious, man to man, you are an astonishing engineer. I would like to formally request permission to be the senior adult advisor on all your future projects. Finn's face lit up, a gap-toothed 1,000-watt smile. Permission granted, sir. Later that night, the penthouse was quiet. Finn was asleep. The meal, their first real, peaceful family dinner, was over. The dishes were clear. Mara found Calder at the piano. He was not playing, and he was just sitting there, watching the lights of Harborview. She came and sat beside him on the bench. He turned, and the force of his gaze, the raw, unfiltered relief and want in his eyes, stole her breath. He did not say a word. He raised his uninjured hand, cupping her face as if she were made of the most delicate glass. His thumb stroked her cheekbone. She leaned into his palm, her eyes closing. The kiss was everything the others had not been. It was not desperate. It was not frantic. It was deep and slow and certain. It was a promise kept. It was a vow. His arm slid around her waist, pulling her from the bench and onto his lap. His embrace a fortress. Her hands found his neck, her fingers lacing into his hair. It was a kiss that spoke of homecoming, of storms weathered and harbors found. His heart hammered against her chest, a frantic, wild rhythm that matched her own. She buried her face in the warm, safe hollow of his neck, her cheek pressing against his skin warm, his breath soft in her ear. The balcony doors were open. The soft night wind licked at the curtains, carrying the scent of the sea. Below them, the lights of Harborview, his city, their city, glittered like a carpet of fallen stars. The camera held on them, two figures united in the darkness, before pulling back and back until they were just one more light in the city they had saved. Mara's voice was the last thing heard, a warm, confident whisper over the music. The night at Black Reef went silent when he roared, "Who touched you?" Since then, no one has dared, not even fear. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to connect with you, so please leave a comment below and let us know where in the world you are listening from and share your thoughts on Calder and Mara's journey. Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Story, and like this video. It truly helps us. And if you want to support us even more, hit that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.